Down in the trenches, we put in the work in. Enemy lurking, but we never hurt in. Sword in the hand, got the truth on the belt. Bringing the heat that the devil gon' melt. Yeah, we holding the line. I wake up every morning, gotta put the heavy armor on. Fighting against the darkness from the midnight to the early dawn. They throwing the dark, but they hitting the shield. I'm standing tight. We stepping precise. We already pay, yeah, he covered the price. Listen to the horns going off like a siren. We walking through the fire, and we coming out iron. Hold up. Check the perimeter. Keep your eyes open. The battle is physical. Battle is spiritual. Breathe. Now attack. Down in the trenches, we put in the work in. Enemy lurking, but we never hurt. Sword in the hand, got the truth on the belt. Bringing the heat that the devil gon' melt. What? Yeah, we holding the line. Look. Yeah, we holding the line. Look. I don't play no game. I speak the truth. I drop the name. I'm moving, I'm grooving, I'm proving the power is active and never retreat. The enemy thought he won't win, but look at the scoreboard, he taking the beating. Yeah. Great evening. That is the trenches, and we are in tonight from Monday's meal. It's more manna to help move you to your life mandate. I'm so glad you're taking time to tune in tonight, my friend. Grab in as many people as you can tonight. Tonight's show is going to be a little bit different. The episode tonight, we're spending time tonight talking a little bit about gerrymandering, John and you, what, why, and how the Supreme Court decision in regards to the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And tonight is going to be interesting on tonight. I want to spend some time talking about what, why, and how, and what does it really mean for you. So let's not delay. Let's get right on into tonight's discussion on tonight. And I want to say, as we get started with this, one of the things that we simply found out about all of this is that, we find ourselves headed for a throwback experience, if you will, here in the U.S. And so now is the time for the church, the true and real authentic church, if you will, to begin to come together to make sure that the needs of everybody are met and that we are all of God's children. We are living in a time where it would seem like the history of yesteryear has gone and that we're never going to return back there. But even as we continue to move along inside of the context that we find ourselves in, we are headed right back to where we have been as a country, as a nation here in the United States. But a lot is beginning to change, and some things may be a little bit different. Many people may be wondering why in the world are so many Black and brown people upset at what has happened and what has taken place in Louisiana. And many may not understand what this could potentially turn into. So I thought tonight that I would add a little bit of help to us on tonight and add some context to us. Let me stop real quickly and acknowledge some of those who are in. Good to see you tonight, Mother. Glad that you're here. Sister Dr. Sheila Everett, glad that you are in the house on tonight. Fatia, glad that you're watching on tonight. Share this to as many millennials as you can. Let me jump right back in here, because many people may not understand why so many African Americans find themselves, so many Black and brown persons find themselves kind of with one eye open and one eye closed, looking at the current climate of the country. Here is Professor Eddie, I believe his last name is pronounced Gadir, in terms of his perspective of why he's upset, and many may think that his opinion represents so many different African Americans. Take a quick look at this.
I'm trying to keep myself calm here, Nicole.
Why?
Because I'm really upset.
That's okay.
You get tired of people playing fast and loose with your dead. Mm-hmm. And it was triggered by Obama. You know how many dead people are in the bottom of rivers in Mississippi because they tried to vote? Mm-hmm. How many dead folk, right? Folk who have wounds because of this. And here we are in this moment in the country's history, and we have to deal with this again. You see what I mean? So you think about the glorious revolution, our glorious revolution that produced the Constitution, the courts restrained it, limited, Dred Scott, doesn't extend to us. You think about the Civil War, left 600,000 plus dead. Get the Reconstruction Amendments. We finally look like we're going to try to become a democracy. What do we get? The courts. Slaughterhouse cases. Reduces it. Rolls it back. And now here we are. We've only been a democracy since 1965. Barely then. 15 years later, Reagan is elected, Mobile decision happens, right? Roberts begins his career right there. And so here we are. It's exhausting. And so, yes, we have to get together. Yes, we have to mobilize. Yes, we have to organize. But these people play fast and loose with our dead. They play fast and loose with our sacrifices. They think they own freedom. They can give it to us and take it away whenever they want. And they think we're just supposed to sit here and take this, right? So first of all, I'm just going to express my rage at this decision. And then the second thing we need to do, of course, is to get about the hard work of trying to salvage this democracy as we've done since the moment we've been on these shores.
Where does the first part of it end and the second part begin?
The first part of it ends when we admit, honestly, that racism still occupies the throne of this country. There's nothing about our current days that lead us to believe, that should lead us to believe that we are in a post-racial world. There's nothing about our days. And then once we admit that, admit of our sins, then perhaps we open up a future for us to be otherwise. But the noble lie isn't noble at all. Racism still occupies the throne of this country. And that's clear to me.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. She asked a very, very important question. Where do we begin and where does this end? And he mentioned the statement, we must first acknowledge that racism still is the very foundational bedrock of this country. For many who would say that this nation is built on Judeo-Christian values, that may be in concept and in theory, but in practice, something different has taken place within the continental United States. I want to just kind of, for those who may not be familiar with all of what's been happening and taking place, let me just share my screen with you all one more time. Let's kind of get into it on tonight. And let's talk a little bit about what's really happening and taking place. And so many may not be aware, on April the 29th of this year, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 partisan ruling regarding Louisiana's congressional map, further weakened Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The conservative majority that ruled that the map relied too heavily on race to create a majority Black district, effectively limiting the ability to challenge redistricting plans as racially discriminatory. And so this decision could lead to redistricting that reduces minority voting. So now I want us to understand, when did all of this happen? How did this come about? The sourcing information that I'm giving us tonight is coming directly from the Department of Justice. You can go and look it up yourself. It was first introduced in the October term of the gathering of the Supreme Court, specifically for the Western District of Louisiana. The lot numbers 24, section 109, they argued on October the 15th, 20 and 25, and the decision was finally made on October the 26th, on April the 29th of 20 and 26. So now let's just take a look at the history and the process of all this. Let me make this a little bit larger so that we can all see this. So in 20 and 22, after the state redrew its congressional districts, a federal judge in the Robertson versus Adrin case held that the 20 and 22 map likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Okay. And so because it did not include an additional majority Black district, but when the state drew a new map, I want you to see this clearly here. The state drew a new map that contained such a district. The map was challenged as racial gerrymandering. I want us to understand, they went after Louisiana and said Louisiana had not drawn a district that would represent adequately its population of African American people. The state legislature went back and drew a district so that it would be reflective and representative of Black and brown people. They used the same language to say that it's a violation of the 1965 Section 2 Civil Rights Act. Let me just come back into this, because when you start to look at some of this, anybody else with me smell like something fishy going on. It is argued that Senate Bill 8 violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and the state appealed to the court. Amazingly, the Supreme Court decided that the state legislature, the Senate of Louisiana, violated what was designed to protect the right of African Americans to vote. Really, what's at stake here is the district that was drawn would have tipped the scale and the balance in the favor of a certain party. I won't even get into all of that. Come on, stay with me tonight. Somebody type it in. Something has to change. Type this in with me on tonight. Something has to change. Something has to change. Type that in. Something has to change. Come on. So for me, I don't know about you, this is hypocrisy of the highest order. So when we look at what does Section 2 say, when somebody is looking and asking, okay, preacher, what does Section 2 say? Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits voting practices or procedures that discriminate on the basis of race, color, or membership in one of the language minority groups identified in Section 4 of the Act. So those groups are African Americans, okay, Black, Hispanic, Asian Americans, those three. And then it ties directly to 64, race, creed, color. You cannot discriminate base it on the base of those 6 in 64 and in 65. Somebody typing in, something has got to change. Something has got to change. Come on, type that in with me tonight. Something has got to change. And so, passed at the height of the civil rights movement, okay, the Voting Rights Act prevents systemic and widespread voter suppression, okay, or voter discrimination experienced by people of color. And in recent years, what is just interesting is that the Voting Rights Act itself has been used to block voter suppression laws, such as demands for voter identification, voter registration, purging of the rolls, all of those kinds of things. So I want you to understand what's going on. They've taken the law itself, turned it on its head, used it as a means of keeping Black and brown persons from being able to make their way to the polls, and they are citizens here in the United States, as a means of now beginning to erase what has already been done to give us access toward the polling process. Come on, let me just come back into some more to this one tonight. Somebody one more time, type it in for me. Something has got to change. Type this in. Something has got to change. So now what does all this mean? This means that this case ruling can be used as a matter of precedent. Type that word in, precedent, precedent. Type that word in, precedent, precedent, to apply to other states. So for example, this comes up in Florida, where they've got to redraw lines. Georgia, redistricting, they've got to draw. The Carolinas, Mississippi. In Virginia, we just voted. We've done our jobs so that we can ensure that there are those districts that are underrepresented in the state legislature. I like to refer to it as the House of Burgess. It is affectionately known today, or affectionately the House of Burgess. It's the General Assembly here in Virginia today. We've done our job by referendum, but other states have not done theirs. And so when you consider the history of poll taxes and brown bag tests and reading tests in Virginia, this takes us back to the potential of the same kind of thing to begin to happen and take place in Louisiana. And so it wasn't until 1971, I want you to hear what I'm saying. It wasn't until 1971, after the 65 legislation was passed, that Virginia repealed poll taxes, repealed reading tests, repealed what we would call the black codes and those sort of things. Not until 1971. That was 1 year after I was born. This, my friends, is the foundational framework of the nation that we are living in. And please don't let anyone cause you to think differently. And I am what we would call an infallible, inerrant, God is immutable preacher. I believe in the 66 as foundational, and I believe in the preamble and the constitutional documents here given to us that provide freedoms here in these United States of America. So now I'm one of those that is saying now is the time for the church to lead. Why? Because the church has always been designed to be the consciousness of the state. For the sake of time, I don't have time to go back all the way into the history with Jesus and him being the consciousness to the state of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. I wouldn't have the time of Paul speaking on Mars Hill to begin to reference what he said to the consciousness of those who governed and created culture in the lives of other people. It has always been the job of the church individually and institutionally and corporately to be the consciousness of the state, to ensure that people have an opportunity to be able to have access toward the freedoms that are present as a basis of our humanity. And let me just say this to many of my white colleagues and brothers and sisters who are evangelicals. Let me just suggest to you that many of you may think that what is taking place has no impact. It has no effect upon you, and you may think that's not our problem. I want to suggest to you and beg to differ with you. This is going to affect all of us in a variety of ways. But better than me saying it, let me have someone who shares the same opinion that is of the same ethnic background. Take a quick look at this.
And you think the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act doesn't affect you? Think again. Because that instinct that this is someone else's problem, that it won't affect me, just them, is how we ended up here. Exactly. What actually happened was the Supreme Court didn't just weaken the Voting Rights Act for voters of color. They dismantled the enforcement mechanism that makes your vote, your white vote, mean something too. Because the truth about voter suppression is that nobody says this part out loud. It's that it's never about race. It's always been about power, the big guy versus the little guy. Make no mistake, this decision means fewer voting places. Guess what? That's your rural white county too. Stricter ID laws, that's your elderly mother who doesn't drive and doesn't have a passport. Purged voter rolls, that's your kid who moved home from college. Early voting cuts, that's you working 2 jobs trying to get to the polls on a Tuesday before they close. The architecture of suppression doesn't check your skin color at the door. It checks your income, your zip code, whether you have the flexibility in your schedule, whether you can afford to wait in a 4-hour line. They gut the Voting Rights Act, and what they really gut is the guardrail, the legal infrastructure that allows anyone to challenge a law designed to make voting harder. Without it, state legislatures move faster. They can redistrict with less scrutiny, with the primary goal being to steal our elections and take away our democracy. They can close polling locations in working class neighborhoods, all working class neighborhoods. This is not abstract. This is your school board, your water quality, your hospital staying open, your sheriff, your state legislature drawing the maps that decide whether your vote is competitive ever again. The Voting Rights Act was not now or ever was a black gift. It was an American promise, written in blood, in Selma on a bridge, by people who understood that democracy is not self-executing. Someone has to guard it. And if you've been sitting on the sidelines thinking this fight wasn't yours because you're white, you are wrong. They're coming for you too. Stay steady, eyes open, guard the republic.
My goodness, today, the only thing that I may have a disagreement with her about is that it wasn't necessarily a black gift, because remember, we were 2/3 of a human being when it came time to have access toward the right to vote. We were not necessarily citizens. So it is a means of self-correcting an error that took place in regards to our identity, but she is absolutely correct. Water quality, roads, we have this phrase and saying, not in my backyard, NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, friends, it's coming right to your backyard. She is absolutely correct. It pulls the strength and the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that state legislatures cannot just get away with taking us 100 years back. And what this does is it creates a precedent to take us 100 years back. I have to come back at another time and talk to us so that we can stand guard over our 19 and 16 and 23 and 15 and 14-year-olds of what it was like 100 years ago. I'm telling you, you don't want to go back there. They are not prepared to be able to handle that mentally and to be able to handle that emotionally. None of us are. And it will take us into a point where we're headed into a bloodbath here in America. I got to just put Greg's commentary up here. He says, it's fascinating. The system wasn't built for us, so they can just interpret the laws in the favor that they want to. He goes on to say, they're the elite trying to wipe us out, black or white, and we can't see it. Greg, I'm doing my best, Greg. I'm trying to talk to us. Somebody type it in. Something has to change. Something has to change. Something has to change. So listen, let me tell you why I'm so animated, because, and I'm going to land this plane here in just a second, but I want to show you one more thing. I'm so animated because this type of jurisprudence, well, let me use different language. This type of a process legally creates a precedent for now when they start to come for the freedom of speech. When they come for that particular amendment, particularly Christians, you better be on guard and better be watching, because case law has a means of being able to create the opportunity for the entrance of a system that is told to us in Revelation 13. And we're getting very, very, very close. So the rights of churches, the tax status may change. Reading from scripture may change. This is a means whereby which it can get there, not just on the issue of race, but religion is, the freedom of religion is soon coming right behind that. For those who may not, and I'm particularly concerned with the millennials who are behind us, who are not necessarily aware of this kind of activity here on the shores of America. Young people in particular. You know, as I said on Sunday, it's praying time more than anything else. I'm moving along for the sake of time. Stay with me, 6 more minutes and we're done. I'm concerned about the young, about how to have a sense of restraint in their emotions, their mind, their process of how they think. They never could think that something like this could be headed their way. For those who also think that America is some place of excitement and freedoms, I'm going to show you some history, if you will, about Virginia. I think I can show you better than I can tell you. Now, let me just say there are 1 or 2 choice words in this. And so because of those 1 or 2 choice words, please, it is not the commentary of the preacher, but it is the language used in the times. Only 1 or 2. So I want to say that ahead of time because I don't want the church to cancel me because of the 1 or 2 words. But take a quick look at this.
Country that most people outside of policy circles have never read. It's not classified, it's not hidden. It's an 8-page memo written by a corporate lawyer in Virginia in the summer of 1971. And that memo is the single most important document in modern American politics, because almost every political shift that you've lived through, Citizens United, the Federalist Society, the capture of the Supreme Court, the collapse of labor unions, corporate money in every election, was sketched out on 8 pages by one man. It's called the Powell Memo. And once you know it exists, prepare to be uncomfortable. His name was Lewis Powell. He was a 63-year-old corporate attorney from Richmond, Virginia. He sat on the board of Philip Morris, the tobacco company, and spent years arguing in public that cigarettes did not cause cancer. He represented American corporations. He was a fixture of the Virginia establishment. And on August 23, 1971, he wrote a confidential memo to his friend Eugene Snyder at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The memo was titled Attack on the Free American Enterprise System. It was marked confidential, which means it wasn't meant for the public. So fast forward 2 months. Richard Nixon nominated Lewis Powell to the United States Supreme Court. The memo wasn't disclosed during his confirmation hearings. The Senate never saw it. The American public never saw it. Powell was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice in January 1972, 6 months after writing a private plan for corporate America to take over the country. The memo opens with a warning, right? No thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under attack. Powell argued that business was losing the universities, losing the media, losing the younger generation, losing the courts. And the only way to reverse it was a coordinated multi-decade plan funded by corporations to take back every institution that shaped American opinion. The language in the memo is the language of war. Let's call a spade a spade. He used the words frontal assault, warfare, rifle shots, guerrilla warfare. He underlined the word survival. He said that corporate America had to abandon compromise and appeasement. Now, this plan had 4 parts. 1, capture the universities, fund scholars, endow chairs, monitor textbooks, pressure faculty. 2, capture the media, surveil television content, produce counter-programming, build new press favorable to corporate interests. Hello? Are you listening? 3, capture the courts. He wrote directly that the judiciary may be the most important instrument for change. Fund strategic litigation, build legal organizations, get corporate-friendly judges on the bench. 4, capture the political system, build lobbying arms, create political action committees, spend on elections at a scale that nobody's ever done before. Seriously, that was the plan. 8 pages of that bullshit, written in a matter of weeks. So here's what happened in the decade after the memo was written. 1972, the Business Roundtable was formed, a lobbying organization of Fortune 500 CEOs. 1973, the Heritage Foundation was formed, with seed money from Joseph Coors. 1973, the American Legislative Exchange Council was formed. That's the organization that writes model legislation, which gets copy-pasted into state legislatures. Stand your ground laws, voter ID laws, anti-protest laws, right-to-work laws. Literally all of it. Drafted by corporate lobbyists in a conference room. Then handed to state legislatures to introduce. 1977, the Cato Institute. Founded with Koch money. 1977, the Chamber of Commerce National Litigation Center. Now the most successful corporate advocacy group in Supreme Court history. 1978, the Manhattan Institute. 1982, the Federalist Society. That's the organization that controls the conservative judicial pipeline. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Every single one of those organizations was a direct descendant of the Powell memo. In 1971, there were 175 corporations, right? By 1982, there were over 2,400. 2,400. But I said all that. Here's the part that should stop you in your tracks, though. In 1978, 6 years after he was sworn in, Lewis Powell wrote the majority opinion in a Supreme Court case called the First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti. That case is the first one that established that corporations have First Amendment rights. The right to spend money influencing elections. Let that sit for a second, right? You can't make this shit up. The same man who wrote a private blueprint for corporate America to take over this country then went to the Supreme Court and wrote the ruling that legalized corporate political spending. He handed them the weapon he had designed in secret 7 years earlier. In 2010, the Supreme Court decided Citizens United v. FEC was going to be the ruling that opened the floodgates for unlimited corporate money in American elections. The Citizens United majority opinion cited Powell's 1978 ruling over and over again, which means the case that broke American democracy in 2010 was built on the same foundation poured by a man who designed the entire plan in a private memo in 1971. So I just want you to take a minute to think about everything you've ever seen break in your lifetime. Unions, public schools, local newspapers, state legislatures, the Supreme Court. Think about every time you've wondered why this country keeps moving in one direction, no matter who gets elected. Now understand this. The people who built the machine that did that to you handed each other a memo in 1971. They passed it around corporate boardrooms. They funded the think tanks. They endowed the chairs. They built the courts. They trained the judges. They wrote the laws for 54 years. While most of us were just trying to live, they were executing a plan. So no, it's not you. You were never behind in an argument. You were playing a game that somebody else had already finished designing. I got nothing. I got no more words.
So my friends, the best way I can explain it and say it to us is the scripture says, where no one could buy and sell unless they had the number of his name, that corporations can be given First Amendment rights, where a memo can decide a dissenting opinion for the reversal for the Supreme Court. We're headed somewhere. We're absolutely headed somewhere. Let me come back over to some of you in the comment section. Mike says the Freemasons and Illuminati been talking like this. Sister Anita says, yeah, Bishop, this one here took me out. People who have never worked in government will be flabbergasted by how much these good ideal fairies in high places have written memos that have been taken and placed directly into laws and standards that run our country. Absolutely. Somebody may be saying, well, Dr. Johnson, all of this is just really something that is viewed as conjecture. Where's the evidence of this Powell Amendment? I'm so glad that you asked me the question, because I'm too much of a scholar, too much of a researcher to not give you something that you can see in your own eyes. There you are right there. There he is, Louis F. Powell, to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Education Committee, and he is talking directly to the chairman. Here is August 23, 1971, marked confidential, just like she said, an attack on American free enterprise and how we should respond back. If you're interested in seeing it, my friends, DM me, inbox me, get in touch with me. I'll send you the memo, email it to you, text message it to you, however you want to see it. I think we're at a time now where we've got to do something. Something's got to change. We got to go back to what our forebearers, those from the boomer generation and the silent generation, and even some of us Gen Xers, it's time to roll up our sleeves now. We got to get back to work. We got to get back to work in the trenches. See y'all again soon. Y'all take care. God bless. More importantly, bye-bye.